Okay, so this evening we are in the DC-3, which we can see parked up here at Charles M. Schulz Airport, just north of the San Francisco Bay. We are going to do some circuits in the DC-3 to show you how to reliably land it without the aeroplane going into a ground loop. So we're going to roll out onto the runway. No hurry, just going to gently roll out. There's hardly any wind today, so we've pretty much got free choice of runways. Okay, so if we just go full throttle.
Going around Frontier Flight 0. Frontier Flight 0, contact Oakland Center on 132.2.
Take no notice of ATC. I'll go and tune them out in a moment. Okay, so the tail, I've got no flaps on by the way, you don't need it on the DC-3 to take off. You can see we're actually in the air already, so just the weight of the tail has lifted the aircraft off the ground. You just need to be careful about airspeed, so we're watching that indicated airspeed, so getting the gear up so the drag will be reduced. You'll see the airspeed start to climb. We can come back off of maximum power, put it back to about 95%. Okay, so we're flying about 320 degrees, so we're wanting to go about, what's that, 320, that's 40 degrees past, so 140 degrees for the reciprocal, so let's go and turn around. Just slowly turning the aircraft. There is no magic to this. The trick we are going to use to land the aircraft and not have the tail turn on us. There's actually two tricks. One is to keep thrust over the tail. The next trick is to not try and slow down too quickly. If you imagine kind of like a pendulum, if you try and slow down too quickly, all of the weight goes to the nose and the tail flips round. Or you know, if you're trying to arrest this end of the plane, then the weight behind will try to swap ends. So don't try and slow down too quickly. So we're just going to come down, turn back in, and come into runway 32. So we're going to give ourselves a bit of a gap. We'll do a couple of circuits just to explain what we're doing. But if you maintain thrust over the tailplane, then you don't have any issues. Okay, I'm going to turn the engine noise down a bit. It's a bit too noisy, so you can hear me. Alright, we're going to get rid of the comm radio as well, won't we? Should keep it quiet for a while. Okay, let's see how far away we are now. A bit too close. A few more seconds and then we'll turn back in. Have to keep an eye on the airspeed. We've crept up to 140 knots. So I'm going to come off to 50% throttle just as we make the turn. We don't want to be much above 100 knots when we're on finals. So let's get that gear back down. There's that thing with the throttles on the DC-3 as well, where if you haven't got the gear down you get a klaxon. So we're just dropping the gear again. So there's the runway. We're just going to scoot ourselves sideways a little bit in the seat. So we're going quite fast, but that's fine because we're doing a touch and go anyway. Some of the speed will bleed off as we get closer. Okay, so you can see the speed is starting to come off. Indicated airspeed down here, look, is bleeding down now. So at the moment I've got the throttles idle, but when we get closer I'm going to reopen them. Because we don't want the throttles completely on idle as we're rolling along the runway. I'm just opening them a little bit. Okay. So we come down ever so gently. Because we still have thrust over the tail, we can still steer, look. So I can still use the rudder because I have thrust over it. So I'm going to speed back up. So you notice I was able to control our direction very accurately. So wheels back up. And we turn back to 140 degrees again as we climb out. So this time we'll do it again and we'll slow down more. So on approach we'll come in slower but still with thrust over the tail. Trim the nose up slightly so I'm not holding it up with the stick. Okay, let's have a look outside. So there's the runway we'll be coming back into again later. So this time we'll slow down more on approach. So hopefully it will show the idea that we come in not too slow and we don't slow down quickly and we keep thrust over the tail. Okay, so that's the runway. Okay, so we come off the speed now. We're turning back towards the airfield. By holding the nose up slightly, I'm losing speed immediately, which is good. So this time we're going to go for flaps and gear. I'm going to go for the middle flap setting. So you can see we've overshot the turn slightly. That's fine. We'll just straighten up before we get that. So we're just watching that indicated airspeed and holding it at about 100 knots as we descend down in. Obviously, if you come in too steeply, you will accelerate as you descend, which is not ideal. So it's just practice to have the runway at the right kind of orientation. Obviously with the gear and the flaps down we've got a lot of drag going on. So we can afford to keep the engine, or to keep the thrust over the tail. Because we're fighting against the drag with the propellers. But yeah, the mistake people make is removing all thrust from the propellers, or most of it, so just a tick over, and trying to stop quickly, which causes the airplane to pendulum. So this time we're coming in pretty much on the marks. So I have not got the tail wheel locked, by the way. Okay, so I can still steer because I still have thrust, remember. We'll start applying the wheel brakes, start pulling back, and we can hold the centre very easily, look. But now we're on the tail wheel, you can hear it skidding around a little bit, we can go back to tick over. So it wasn't that difficult, was it? So we'll just spin around, take off in the opposite direction, and we'll repeat it again. There's no wind today, so we can get away with doing this. Well, the wind actually keeps moving around while I'm doing this, to be honest. It's not a problem. So flaps are up. So we'll let if we push forwards, yeah, the aircraft is still, it's interesting, isn't it? It wanted to take off again. It was almost in a stall condition because they didn't press forwards early enough to lift the tail. So the aircraft almost entered a stall straight off the runway. So we get the gear back up. This time we'll just do a circle and come straight back in on runway 32 again. Actually, it might make more sense just to do the circuit the other way to show that having a slight wind either one way or the other isn't really going to make any difference. So we're turning to 320 degrees. Let's just correct the gyro compass. Okay. So we'll let the aeroplane fly along on its own for a bit, just coasting along with it trimmed out. It's climbing slightly because it's accelerating. If we want to make the nose dip, we can just pull some power away. See how rapidly that happened? Just removed thrust for a couple of seconds and the nose fell. So we can do the same routine again. We'll give ourselves some room to approach. Make sure we're only about the 100 knot range. Keep thrust over the tail and try not to stop too quickly. Okay, that's probably enough. There goes the gear and the flaps. This time we'll go for full flaps, as if it makes much difference to us. So we're coming in from an angle as well, which makes it a little bit more interesting. So we're looking at the indicated airspeed again. We don't want to accelerate too much. Obviously with full flaps we've got even more drag, so we can afford to open the throttle even more. Yeah, with full flaps, look, it's floating a lot more. But again, because we've still got the engine running, we can still use the rudder because there's still force over it. Even, you know, at quite slow speeds, we can start to feather the brakes and the tail will start to drop with the weight of it. And it's just started to get away. Look, that was interesting. So because I pulled the throttle back more, it started to turn. So you really can't get away with coming in too slowly. You have to gradually eke the speed off, and then you're fine. As soon as you've got the tail down, you're fine. Let's go and taxi back in. Looks amazing, doesn't it? The DC-3. It's very clever. And the sound's awesome as well. Okay, so yeah, that's all I really wanted to cover today, was just doing those few circuits to show you that you actually can still control it on the runway. So all you need is thrust over the tail and don't try to slow down too quickly. On that final one, I was playing around to see how quickly we could stop and just started to push it too much. Anyway, we're going to leave it there and I'll see you again soon.